The majority of people who listen to this podcast or watch these recordings, I think the toughest communications that they have are not with opposing counsels, are not with judges, it's with their employees.
And that is how you turn people into even bigger advocates for your company. Because when people are seen and they're heard and their concerns are taken seriously, they feel valued.
The better your communications are with your employees, the better you understand them and the better they understand you. Welcome to Grow Law Firm Podcast. I have a very unusual guest here with me. Laurie Gilbertson is a former prosecutor in sex crimes, violent crimes, organized crime. When I say this out loud, and you were a TV legal expert, I am getting the jingle from Law and Order.
Law and Order.
Special Victims Unit. Ta-da!
Totally. You got it, Sasha. That was it in a lot of ways and not it in a lot of ways.
I bet. By the way, I do not know where you practiced law as a prosecutor. Was it in New York City by any chance?
It was in New York City. I was in
Totally Special Victims Unit. Totally. So they made show off of you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because if you've ever heard of the show NYPD Blue,
Sure,
which is a super old show, that was started by some detectives from Queens County, which is where I practiced for some time. And they used to come out and just talk to all the line prosecutors and get ideas for their show. So every now and then you'd be watching and you'd see something and I'd be like, oh, that's my case. That's my case. So it does come from real life.
Fascinating. What got you into that line of work, other than law school, obviously?
Yeah, well, I always wanted to be a trial lawyer. My father is a trial lawyer. I grew up kind of sitting at the kitchen table and learning to advocate for myself, learning to make arguments, because if I wanted to have a discussion with him, I had to kind of really be on it because he's so clear thinking and such an amazing advocate. So that was a bit, in my DNA. But my very first day in law school, my very first day in my criminal law class, the professor was talking about cases. And something in me just clicked. And I just thought, these are stories. These are real people. This is really where you can see justice be served. And this is what I want to do. And that was it.
Amazing. So since then, you moved on and you became the CEO of Tribeca Blue Consulting, which is obviously as a consulting firm, as the name suggests. And you help executives and lawyers improve their communication skills so that they can deliver powerful stories and advance their careers or grow their businesses.
Yes. And go on. No, I was going to say, it's funny to hear CEO because that sounds like such a big title. And I feel like, well, it's me, I'm the one who's out there doing it. So yes, executives, entrepreneurs, and trial lawyers is something that I've really delved into lately. When I was starting my company, I was kind of thinking, what are the skills that I have? What can I share with people? What is it that I want to do? And that came from, leaving the practice of law and really, as many lawyers, in transition from leaving law have to figure out, what do they want to do next? And I really thought, this trial work, this is what I know. I know how to communicate. I know how to be persuasive. I know how to advocate. How can I teach other people to do that? Because if you can communicate well, put your ideas out there well, connect with people well, you can conquer the world. You can do anything.
Makes perfect sense. And we find that sometimes excellent communicators can really change the world, sometimes for better. Some of them use those communication skills for good and sometimes for worse. Like we know, Adolf Hitler was an amazing communicator through training, was not naturally an amazing speaker, but through training, he became an amazing speaker and he used it for evil. But I find it interesting. We communicate all throughout our lives before we actually have verbal skills while we're little babies. And all throughout our lives, we communicate. We communicate at home with our loved ones. We communicate with our friends. We communicate with our colleagues. If we're employers, we communicate with our employees. If we're managers, we're communicating with people who work for us. We communicate with judges. We communicate with opposing counsels. When I think about law firm owners, and that is the majority of people who listen to this podcast or watch these recordings, think the toughest communications that they have, and this is based on numerous communications, not with them directly, but with their employees. The toughest communications that they have are not with opposing counsels, are not with judges, it's with their employees.
Interesting. And
That,
what is so challenging for them with employees?
so most lawyers, I assume, are somewhat hard asses.
Tough.
Tough. Like
Yeah,
you have to
tough.
be tough to choose
Rigid.
this profession. You have to be tough to get through law school. You have to be tough to become an employer lawyer. You just have to be tough. Most of these people are tough, no nonsense, get shit done kind of approach people.
Yeah.
And when it comes to working with employees today, and we're recording this early 2024, the expectations are completely different than what they were even just a decade and a half ago. Today, people are expecting softer communications, more understanding, more respect, less I
Mm,
told you so, more we're working together. So when you think about working with attorneys, and I know that you focus more on trial lawyers, but because you're a
mhm,
communications expert, I want to talk about really this, right? When you work with attorneys, how do you start? Like, how do you assess their communication skills? How do you set tangible goals for improving those communication skills? And what are
mhm.
the typical expected outcomes?
Okay. Wow. One thing that really comes to mind as you're saying all that is something I see typically with attorneys in terms of communication, in terms of marketing, in terms of even learning how to run a business like a law firm, is that the legal field and the business field are so separate. And so many lawyers go through law school and they learn to think a certain way and they get into a law firm. And all of a sudden, here they need to call on some business skills. They need
Yeah.
to call on some leadership skills. They need to call on communication skills. And those aren't things that are taught in law school. In fact, I think those are kind of things that, are just completely ignored and almost pounded out of us in law school because we're
Mhm.
so focused on a very, very specific linear way of thinking. So the first thing in kind of assessing communication, I really like to take a tool from the business field. And I like to do this kind of 360, almost like an audit, like a business audit that sometimes leaders go through and executives go through, but I do it for communication. Because a lot of times, you hear your voice on something, and maybe you hear your voice on the podcast, Sasha, and you go, oh my gosh, is that what I sound like? Right? I know I do, and never like it. And so people don't necessarily know how they're coming across.
Mhm.
Someone might be communicating and thinking that they're being very, as you said, softer, more collaborative, more conversational, but in actuality, they may sound like a hard ass. You just don't know. So the first step is for people to really learn, how are they being perceived? What really is their communication? What is that kind of style? Once they kind of see how other people may be seeing it, and then kind of do an audit of themselves of what they feel comfortable with, the kinds of arenas they feel comfortable talking in, smaller groups, larger groups, one-on-one, then we can really start working on the actual skills.
How
And
does
so you have
one,
to start
so
there.
apologies for the interruption, but this is really
Yeah.
important. We do not really see ourselves from a side.
Hmm.
How does one go about actually learning how other people perceive us? Because
Hmm.
this might be a very hard conversation to have with somebody who
Hmm.
may have been working for you for years. You
Hmm.
have to go to them and be like, Jenny, I want to have this frank conversation. What questions
Well,
would you ask that employee?
well, you can get a middle person like me,
Hmm.
who's the person who asks those questions. Um, for some people, it doesn't necessarily even have to be in the work field. What I like to do, even with law students starting out, is ask people. Ask people who are close to you, who you communicate with regularly, who you have relationships with, these questions. Ask them, what does my communication style seem like to you? What do you think of when you and I maybe get in a discussion about something? Could you use 3 words to describe how you see me? That kind of thing. And you ask people to be really honest, and kind of do this assessment, and you start to really see some themes come through. For example, I went through a lot of that when I was transitioning from working in legal education to starting my own company. And I had a certain idea of how I came across, and it was not at all what people were telling me. And that helped me to really change my communication. You have to be willing to take the input, and you have to be willing to just ask. And when I have taught in various law schools, and I ask law students to do this, and they get very, very nervous about it, but they always come back and say, wow, that was amazing. You know, I asked 5 people how they saw me. I asked them how they think I communicate, and I've learned so much about myself. So that's where you start.
That's fascinating. So I think that if you can afford, if you're a law firm owner, then you cannot afford not to, you should probably hire a third party to do the asking. Because when it comes to hiring third parties, people tend to open up more to somebody who is impartial, that third party,
Right.
than they would open up to you. I used to run a consulting company, and what we did client interviews, and we did lost client interviews. And the things that we learned, it would open eyes this wide.
Yes.
Like those companies who we serve, they like,
Right.
we never thought about that. We never looked at things that way. We didn't know our clients saw us that way. We didn't know clients leave us because of this.
Right. And if you don't ask, you will never know, because they're not going to tell you. You know, they're not going to necessarily reach out and tell you. I think that there are certainly some law firms that I've worked with who are very attuned to this, who will look at upcoming associates and see what their skills are like, and really be able to recognize whether maybe a lack of good communication skills could be holding them back. And when a firm like that contacts me and lets me know this and says, we want you to meet with them and see what you can do. Nobody wants to be told you're not a good communicator, you have to get better. No one wants to be told that. You kind of just want to know, look, this is something that, just like, if you were going to the gym and you had a personal trainer, this is something that's going to help you. Use those muscles, know what to do, give you the exercises so you can do the work, and you can get stronger and you can get better, just like in the gym.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. So I think those kinds of firms I love working with, because I find they really recognize that communication is such an important skill for advancement in the firm. And that kind of goes to what you were saying about law firm owners. You don't just need that among owners and their employees. If you want to have this kind of great company culture, and you want to be really really doing good business and have great client services, everyone needs to have that. Everyone needs to follow that. Everyone needs to start kind of learning some of those business and leadership techniques. And that is honestly sorely lacking, I think, in a lot of law firms.
This just made me think of a very personal example for me. In September, my partner and I were in offsite training for a number of days. We were far away from the office. And he and I, before the next session, we're sitting in this small cafe, having a cup of coffee. We're talking about something. And when he responded to something that I said, I instantly kind of jerked away, because he did this and was dismissive, and he waved his hand like he was brushing me off. And my partner and I, we have a really great connection. We've been working together now for more than 6 years. We're aligned 99% of the time. We both really appreciate this work relationship. Great guy. We have really nice culture at work. Our employees rarely leave, and everybody brings their friends here. So when I saw that, I was like, wait, I see this happen. I see him do this from time to time. And I'm like, listen, bud, don't brush me off. Don't do this. And he looks at me and he's like, oh, but do you know why I do this? And I'm like, you don't care? What is it?
Yeah.
And he was like, I do this when you tell me forcefully what I am to do, and I don't appreciate that. Never have I ever thought that I tell him forcefully what he should do. But apparently for 5.5 years, because by then we've been working for 5.5 years, I've been doing that, and he's been doing this. And I haven't been noticing what I've been doing, and he hasn't been noticing what he's been doing. And we could have had a better relationship, and we both realized through that very frank communication, but we could have learned this 5 years earlier, and it probably would have made our work relationship even better. We just didn't know.
And now you do,
Now we do.
which is amazing
We
that you were
adjusted.
even, yeah, oh, I bet, which you were able to even have that conversation and be honest and open and transparent with each other. And, you said at the beginning of our conversation that we communicate all the time, right?
Hmm.
That everything in our life is a communication, and that is true. All of these kind of micro communications, like that conversation, are just such great practice for everything. Right? You don't need, the way that you all were open and transparent with each other led to a breakthrough that's going to benefit your business. And I would imagine personally as well, because you don't have to deal with this anymore. And he doesn't have to deal with what he saw
With my
as you
BS,
telling him
for
what to do.
sure. Yeah.
Exactly. It changes relationships. And that changed your relationship. Perfect example. So I always encourage people, you don't need to be in a client meeting, in a big meeting, at a presentation in front of 100 or 1,000 people to be learning and practicing your communication. Every opportunity you have, such as the one you just talked about, are little micro communications that can be practiced for you. And the more you practice, the better you get.
Yeah. But I think those micro communications are leading to major impacts on
Mm-hmm.
organizations. So when I think about improving communications within a business between employer and employees, or managers and employees that work within those employers groups or departments, I always think about employee retention. The better your communications are with your employees, the better you understand them and the better they understand you, the lower your turnover, the higher your employee engagement, and more importantly, their happiness. And when employees are happy,
Mm-hmm.
they tend to perform much better.
Mm-hmm.
Replacing a lost seasoned employee costs you anywhere between 100 and 300% of their annual salary.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very serious financial impact on your bottom line if you lose employee because you do what I used to do with my partner, which is forcefully tell them what they must
Right.
do.
Right.
Right? It's 2024.
Right.
And you might know, I
Yeah.
didn't know I was doing that. For 5.5 years, I've been doing it with this guy, and I didn't know. I was not aware.
And
So,
he
good.
probably wasn't the only one that you were doing it with.
Oh, I bet, because I'm a bit of a
Yeah.
hard ass.
Yeah.
I
Which
recognize
isn't
that.
bad. Which isn't bad.
Nor
You
good.
know, it is, because that's who you are. That's your personality. That's obviously helped you become, or maybe it's not your personality, but maybe it's just part of how you've learned to communicate that has helped in business. If it serves you, you can harness it in a way. And if it
Mm,
doesn't, you change it.
I'm an adult. I'm flexible. If I
Hmm.
recognize that something must be changed to improve the outcomes, and even if it didn't have any financial outcome, but it would just improve our relationship, it's already worth it. And I would make
Yeah,
adjustments.
makes
The
sense.
issue here is that it took us years to recognize the issue. And it was just that spark of the moment. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't even caught on to it for another 5.5 years. But it took us 5.5 years
Hmm.
to realize that. So, what it cost us internally, we do not know. How many decisions we made that were erroneous? Because I know that over 6 years, we have made some big decisions
Hmm.
that were incorrect. And I wonder whether, if our communications were better, would we have
Hmm.
made different decisions? Because some of those decisions were made like, oh, fine, let's do
Yeah.
it your way.
Hmm.
And then a
But
year later, you're like, oh, shit,
what do we do?
bad
Right.
decision.
Yeah, a business relationship like that is almost like a marriage. And
It is.
yeah, with all the good and all the bad. And I've heard of business partners, co-founders, co-CEOs, whatever, going to therapy, almost like
Uh-huh.
marriage, almost like you'd go to a marriage counselor to
Yeah.
work out exactly those things in the
Yeah.
relationship. When I try to think, I'm just trying to think as you're kind of letting me know about all this, which is absolutely fascinating, of ways to kind of keep that communication going. When you have your business partner, I don't know if you all had weekly meetings or
We
times
do.
that you set up, you did, to go
Mm-hmm.
through things. And, there are some questions that I used to ask witnesses at the end of prepping them. to go to trial. And so I'd prepare them, I'd go through everything. And at the end of everything, I'd say, is there anything I haven't asked you about that I need to know before I put you on the stand? Is there anything I haven't asked that you want me to know? And I always found that was the most valuable question, because these things would come out, and otherwise I would have been totally surprised. And so I think applying that to you and your business partner, sometimes in those meetings when you're making decisions, do this, do that, you need to set aside a little time, maybe aside from that meeting, or maybe just having coffee or something, just to focus on, how is our relationship going? How are we communicating with each other? Is there anything that, just open, honest, it stays between the two of you? Is there anything you want me to let me know about what's been going on with us?
Super interesting. This reminded me of one of my early mentors who taught me that he and his wife, now of probably almost 25 years, they have this weekly practice where Sunday night they sit down and they ask each other, how would you rate our relationship this week on a scale of 1 to 10? And if it's 8 or lower, they ask, what could I have done differently in order to make it closer to 8-10? And they do it 52 times a year without a fail. And that keeps their relationship of now over a quarter of a century going really strong, because they never let like a month or a quarter or a year go by. And I think most of us, I never thought about doing that with my business partner. But now that we're talking, now that we're communicating about communications,
That's right.
I'm like, why don't our managers do that with all of their team members?
Yeah.
Because we have a little bit of turnover. It's a little bit what we have, a little bit of turnover. Are we losing some people? Are we losing some engagement? Are we diminishing some of our employee happiness as far as we can impact their happiness because we're not communicating very well? Should we add that into the weekly or at least the monthly practice? Because that could potentially lead to way better outcomes in terms of improving retention, improving performance, and them advocating even harder for our firm so that they continue to bring high quality people here. We barely do any recruitment. Like most of our people come here through referral through our team members, but I wonder if they would be advocating even harder if we improve on our communications.
Yeah. People ultimately, it's human nature. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to know that they matter. And they want to know in a company such as yours that, the management is listening to them, whether it's something big or something small, that they're going to be heard and that their concerns are important. And that is how you turn people into even bigger advocates for your company, because they know that they're valued. Because when people are seen and they're heard and their concerns are taken seriously, they feel valued and they feel happier and they work harder, right? And then they go out and tell everyone, come work at Grow Law Firm. It's really great because you get treated really well, because they really care about us and our value. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's super interesting. So I think that it impacts your bottom line in the short term, middle term, long term, especially the long term, because the stronger your team, the more valuable your business becomes. Because should you need to retire or sell the business, either by default because you're getting old, or by design because you choose to and you prepare for that sale, having a highly engaged team will be a huge value add-on to the buyer, because buyers actually go and communicate with your various managers and some of your employees to understand what it is that they're buying.
Oh yeah, they're going to do their due diligence. They're going to find out. They need to know that, and you have to be transparent about it. I was thinking, even in talking about the relationship with you and your business partner, the fact that you had that conversation, that you all now are communicating even better, is modeling that for your employees, showing them that you are open to having that kind of conversation, that there's no ego necessarily involved just because the two of you are, at the top of this whole organization, that you all value communication. That's why you value it with them. Also, when you model it and they see it, I think that also adds to this great company culture. And should it come time to be sold, you can't create that company culture in the 2 weeks before people are doing their due diligence on your company, right? It's got to be built up over years. And it's the communication part of it is just one of those things that can feel so intangible. And I think a lot of people don't think about improving communication because it feels so intangible. It sounds like, well, making yourself have charisma or something like that, that just sounds like you either have it or you don't. And that's simply not true. So, with your company and kind of modeling this and doing this, you would be giving people kind of a tangible example of how this works and hopefully giving them the, I think, courage to speak up to management and speak up maybe to their team leaders about things that are important to them because they will have seen from the top that matters and that it's important.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. And on the matter of improving company culture, I firmly believe that it takes 3 to 4 years to transform company culture. Not 2 weeks, not a year, 3 to 4 years. And the reason for that is, and this may sound super controversial, but if you have a poor company culture, first of all, your business is way less valuable to a buyer because as they do their due diligence, they will see that your employees are not loving working there. So once there's change in management, probability that they stay gets even lower because you need to prove out to them that you're somehow better than the previous management, which is hard. When there's that transition, it's really hard. So 3 to 4 years is because a lot of people will cycle out within 3 to 4 years. And it's the new people who will see you in a new way with your better communications. But on the subject of better communications, I think I understand now how to assess someone's communication strength and weaknesses. It's kind of like a SWOT analysis on your communication style. For those who don't know, SWOT means strength, weakness, opportunity, and threats. Right? So you're strong because you do this, you're weak because you do this, your opportunities for improvement on that, and your threats are half your team is ready to walk away if they get the same offer as what you're paying them now. And by the way, today, delivering good results to your employees at work and being a good employer is the bare minimum. Like competitive pay and being okay employer, good employer is the bare minimum. Like people expect a lot more today from you as an employer. A couple of days ago, I had side story Joey Coleman on this podcast, and the guy he teaches people like what his most recent book is titled, "Never Lose an Employee Again." And I told him, here's what my partner and I do for our employees, other than paying them competitively and giving them the flexibility of working from home or remotely and having some of the standard benefits and trying to add some additional benefits. We're still a small business, under 60 employees, but we have good benefits. We also take them on an annual retreat somewhere cool. This time, most of us are based in Chicago, so we're traveling to Puerto Rico in about 6 weeks. So
Very nice.
That's cool. We also send them gifts on their annual anniversaries, and we send them gifts around holidays, and we do treat them with respect. And Joey was like, man, you're so far ahead of most. But when you compare that to Google's of this world, and Google has a humongous office here in Chicago.
Yeah.
How do you stack up?
Yeah. How do you?
Probably not so well, but we're not a nearly $1 trillion corporation, right? So we cannot stack up financially, but we can stack up with better communication, treating our employees even nicer. But I think that we're really good communicators with our employees, but are we? I don't know. We never assessed that.
You got to ask them. I mean, part of it is I think you see it through employee retention, right? If people are staying, but I just always tell people you've got to ask. So maybe you need an anonymous survey to your employees about some of this. Give them some ideas about, so you get some feedback. People, I think a lot of law firms will, do that often in terms of kind of what are, associates or partners looking for in terms of training. I see a lot of that. What are they looking for in terms of leadership development? What kinds of things would interest them or be helpful to them as they maybe step into new roles or not? And so maybe that kind of feedback is something you need from your employees. And you're not competing I would think you're not necessarily competing with a Google, because how do you? How do you compete with kind of that kind of money, all of those things? And it's a way of, when I was trying cases, we were always told, you can't pick your facts. Your case is what it is, and your case will have weaknesses, and you can't avoid those weaknesses. It was all about turning those weaknesses into strengths. And so, when I look at a company like yours as opposed to a company like a Google, what you might look at and say, oh, we're small, we don't have the kind of money Google does to do all this, that's not a weakness, that's a strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at the fact that the size gets your employees more attention. It allows you to be more agile and flexible in what you want to do. You don't have to go through 10 different channels to figure out where you want to take your retreat. You get to pick, you get to do it, you get to go. If you need to shut down your office, you shut down your office for that time. So all of these things that may even feel, compared to like a Google, that could be a weakness, they can be incredible strengths, and things that make you really unique, that are going to make a lot of people want to come to you as opposed to going to a Google. And that's going to be a personality and a company culture kind of thing too, where it's just going to be the right fit with you.
Mm-hmm. So super interesting. So I understand now how to perform assessments. So for example, we perform an assessment and we realize that we're way, way weaker communicators than we thought we were. On a scale of 1 to 10, we get rated a 7 on average. And that to me would be like a really low score. But I would accept it because I don't see myself from a side. None of us do. Once we learn that, what is the practical way to go about improving our communication style so that we do get a bump in the score? We do
So who are
improve
we?
that employee retention. We do get better outcomes. We do improve employee happiness. We do improve employee performance. We do improve valuation of our businesses.
Okay, so are we talking about kind of management communication with employees? Is that where we're kind of focusing, or all over, like with clients, with
All.
customers?
So I just want to focus like inter-organization, managers
Okay.
and employees,
hmm
employees and employees.
hmm Yeah, I think, you got to, it can't be intangible. It's got to start being something super tangible. So you have to have opportunities to improve. And some of that is really putting your managers and your employees together. And there are all kinds of team workshops and team exercises that can really start helping managers and employees understand each other better and understand their communication styles better. And you can do it, and I do it in a kind of fun way. And I go back to your conversation with your business partner. He was flicking you, you were saying something to him, the two of you were not connecting, but then you got there. And so in these kinds of workshops, it's the same kind of idea. We're taking it out of necessarily the work sphere and maybe putting it into an exercise involving something, some things I've done as silly as, building something with Legos. Okay. Like I did an exercise at a big group I was facilitating, where we wanted to show employees that who thought that they could only communicate on Slack, the difference between communicating on a Slack channel just online and doing it in person. And these employees were all remote. They never picked up the phone. They never really talked to each other. This conference was the first time they were actually meeting each other. And so this exercise involved, basically, one group had directions on how to build this Lego, kind of just car, something like that. And one group also had the directions. And then one group used Slack and one group used in person. And the results, guess, Sasha, guess which worked better.
Obviously in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so everybody was able to see it. It was fun. It was funny. It didn't require a whole lot of work except for kind of putting their brains to it. And then everything clicked. And in this company, people were then able to say, like, I can use Slack for a few things, but now I really see I got to pick up the phone. I got to talk to this person, or I got to go to their office if I'm in their office. And that changed communication. There are 120 people in this company, and that changed their communication. We heard right after that. The phone calls increased, the in-person communication
Mm,
increased, ultimately their bottom line increased. So
hmm.
things like that, we take it out of the business sphere, we kind of make it fun, but we get to those insights that people can really take back right back into the company. So that's one way of starting to do
Is there another way?
it. There's lots of different ways. I love that you're doing a retreat I think that is something that also really helps with company communication. I think getting people out of what they really consider these kind of, roles that can feel somewhat rigid, no matter how collaborative the company is, and being in a different environment, just allows people to have much more authentic communication, much more open. Sitting down, having a cup of coffee with someone or a glass of wine at night, or you're all sharing a meal, it just opens up that communication to a different realm so that also people take back to the office.
Yeah.
So I think even doing that, where people are really mixing like that,
Yeah.
is another really great way.
We
And
actually
yeah,
intentionally decided that during those retreats, we're not going to have work-related exercises. We're not going to
great.
talk about work. It's all about
Hmm.
hanging out and having fun. That's
Yeah,
it. If work conversations come up, fine. We're not going to facilitate them. We're not going to force them. There are no objectives for these retreats. Get the
hmm,
plane, fly somewhere, hang together for 4 days. This is Thursday through Sunday.
yeah.
Enjoy your life.
Are you hiring, Sasha? Because this sounds really nice. Do you have any openings for, say, a communication specialist?
So
It's awesome. It really is.
potentially.
Yeah.
So here's what, based on this conversation, what we're going to do is we're going to implement this practice. What I mentioned. So Darren Hardy was one of my first real mentors, and he taught me about this Sunday evening exercise with his wife. And I got
Love that.
remarried last year, and
Congratulations.
and thank you. And I have a little post-it on my table that this Sunday my wife and I are going to sit down and do that for the first time.
Hmm.
And now, based on this conversation, I want to implement that at work as well. My partner and I are meeting in 51 minutes, and I'm going to add that to the agenda.
That's amazing. I have 3 children, all teenagers, and I may implement that with them because
Hmm.
I think that sounds like a really amazing way of um,
Huh.
making something as intangible as communication pretty tangible. And I would add to your retreat, I teach legal advocacy. I'm the privileged to have the opportunity to with a great organization. It's the National Institute for Trial Advocacy. We call it NITA. And one of the great things about these programs that I get to teach on is, the teaching is amazing. I get to be with all these real, pillars, incredible trial lawyers in their fields. I get to watch them teach. We get to be with, up and coming trial lawyers. But I think the thing that people enjoy almost the most is the non-work part of it. Sitting
Hmm.
down and talking about things over lunch, going out
Hmm.
for a drink afterwards. And so it's what keeps people kind of coming back and continuing to teach for this organization because they really just foster that connection. So what you're doing with the retreat is fostering that connection. It's a great way to do it.
Yeah. And you just gave me a great idea, and I jotted that down on another post-it, and that is to implement this framework with our boys. We have a 16 and
Hmm.
13-year-old, and we
Hmm.
know that communication, especially with teenagers, could be pretty rough.
Oh
And we've
my,
never we've
that's
never
an
we've never
understatement.
asked them for feedback, but now
Hmm.
we the parents will do that too. So thank you for this idea. I never thought about. Oh, actually, that's not true. So our 13-year-old, he can be pretty emotional, and sometimes he just is like outraged by something we made him do. Like, Alex, wash the dishes before you go to school. You can see his head is
It's
about to
gonna explode.
explode. Like, how dare you? So
Ah,
so now we can't do it Sunday night because we're doing that with my wife Sunday night. So we have to implement it some other time during the weekend where we're going to sit down with them and, hey, how was this week? Well, what about that time when your head nearly exploded when I told you to wash dishes? Because this is where it's like top down instruction, like wash the dishes before you go to school. You still have 10 minutes before you leave. Take care of it.
so you were telling him forcefully to do something, right?
100%.
It makes me think too about one tool that we have not talked at all
Ooh,
in this
what is
very
it?
interesting conversation. Listening. Listening.
Hmm.
It is 100% one of the most underutilized tools in communication. And what made me think of it was talking about your kids. because I have found with my kids that the best thing I can do is listen. And it's how I learn, and it's how I learn how they feel, and it's how, you would learn things like, why was your 13-year-old's head about to explode? It could be because he didn't want to do the dishwasher. It could be because something happened 3 days ago with a friend and it was coming back up. And you learn. And when you listen, you really learn. And so that's something, listening and asking good questions.
Yeah.
And I encourage people to try that, even just for a day. Try to listen more than you talk and try to ask questions, because that is going to give you, just like you want in your feedback surveys, that's going to give you that information. And when managers listen to their employees and ask questions with curiosity, without judgment, just wanting to learn, that's when you really get some real valuable results in your communication.
You just made me think of a book that I read 15 years ago when my now almost 17-year-old was about a year old. And it's titled, it's a very famous book for parents, How to Speak So Your Kids Would Listen, and How to Listen So Your Kids Would Speak.
They will speak.
So I think it's time for me to reread that book.
Yeah, I mean, Sasha, nothing's going to save us when we have teenagers. We just have to get through it, really.
So,
but that's a good one.
Yeah,
it is a really good book.
And it's really definitely a challenge. And I recognize that I'm failing in some of my communications with the kids now. The two of them, 16 and 13-year-old, are completely different in their communication style. The 16-year-old only talks about surface things like sports, rarely talks about something that's deep down. And the 13-year-old will go and just tell you everything. Often there is so much TMI, too much information, but he'll be just like throw up on you, like with everything that he's going on in his mind. And sometimes like you're driving, and you're like, holy crap, kid, you've been talking for the last 40 minutes nonstop. My head is about to explode.
Okay.
So time to re-listen to that book and understand how to better communicate with them, as well as implement this weekly practice of just asking them, hey, how have we been with you, me as a dad and you as a kid, for the what would you say that was on a scale of 1 to 10? And if they lie and they're like, it's been 10, and I'm like, remember that time Tuesday morning when I told you to wash your dishes and you were just outraged? Did that feel like a 10? No.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's how it's going to go. I'm like, how did that feel? Like a 2.
I can't wait to hear how that goes. I think sometimes, even as adults, right? Adults in the business world running companies, we're not perfect communicators.
No.
We don't always know what to do. So how can we really expect kids and then teenagers who are going through, an incredibly transitional and tumultuous time and emotional time in their life to also know how to communicate really well? And I find sometimes, maybe like your 16-year-old who's talking about sports, sometimes, you just have to listen for what's under the surface. They may not know how to tell you a certain thing, but they may communicate about something else. And it really, maybe it's some kind of, it's just their way of getting it out because they don't necessarily know. And it is up to us a lot to really model that. And just listening to your kids, like you're talking about, just asking them, how'd I do this week? Yeah. My goodness, like that is modeling such incredible communication for them for the future in personal life, in business, in everything. They're going to be way ahead because of what you're doing, Sasha.
Yeah, that's a great point. So my 16-year-old is my biological kid, and my 13-year-old is my stepson. So my stepson and I have known each other for now a little less than 2 years. So, and obviously my almost 17-year-old, we've known each other since his day one. And I am a hardcore disciplinarian with the kids. They get up at 6 a.m. and they lift weights downstairs in our home gym. And like discipline, because to me, discipline equals freedom. Like you build in the right practices, you're going to feel good about your life. But if you just flow down the stream without purpose, without any structure, chances of you feeling really good about your life 20 years from now when you're in your 30s, not so great. So I think my almost 17-year-old, I know that he communicates with his mom, my ex-wife, much better than he communicates with me, in terms of like, he'll tell her a lot more. He will not talk to her about sports, but he will tell her a lot more about his personal life. Whereas with me, it's like, sports, and maybe the next vacation we're going to take, and some other like surface things, but
Mhm. Yeah.
that's about it.
Do you find that that kind of structure resonates with both of them, with both kids? Because they sound like different, very different kids.
It does not.
Yeah.
It is almost a military like structure, because if I don't do that, they will not be there.
But beware. Be in a
They
way to kind of be leading to success.
they will be stay up late, eat junk food, never exercise like most of their peers.
Okay.
Do the bare minimum.
Yeah, I just, in terms of kind of that connection, I think
Hmm.
with kids, or at least what I find with my kids, I've got two boys and a girl. So an older boy who's 18, I've got 16-year-old boy-girl twins, and they are all just very different people.
Hmm.
And I think, I've heard that each kid sometimes has a different parent because of how you parent each
Hmm.
child. And I have really found that for them. My daughter and I communicate, talk about everything. We've got really good communication. We've worked on it. We're very open with each other, and we also butt heads sometimes. But the way I communicate with her is a little different than, say, I communicate with her twin, who hears everything, takes in everything, he's like a sponge, remembers everything, but doesn't often share a lot.
Hmm.
So I always just kind of have to wait for when he starts talking. And when he starts talking, I just start listening and asking questions. It's the only way I kind of get the
Hmm.
information. Whereas my other son is very, he's emotional. He's a man who's able to really express his emotions, and we're able to have some deep conversations. And I enjoy that. And when I think about, what you're doing in your house, I get that works totally for you. I cannot imagine, like, I have not been like the strict disciplinarian. Everyone says I'm the softie, yet I have very high expectations and very high standards for them, so they know what those are, and they kind of worked within it. And I've always just been very big on, I didn't like being told what to do. I never liked being told what to do. I'm very driven, I'm very ambitious, I work really, really hard, but I never wanted anyone to tell me what to do. That wouldn't work for me. If someone tells me what to do, I'm going to do the opposite. So I see that with my kids,
It's
and I let
funny
them
that you
kind of
say
find their
that.
own way. Yeah.
I am exactly the same way. In fact, I was on somebody else's podcast a couple hours ago, and they were like, "Tell us about you something that we don't know." I'm like, "Well, I told my parents when I was 4 years old that I'm leaving as soon as I can."
That's awesome.
My
That's
mom,
so
who is now
great.
almost 70, she reminds me of that from time to time. She's like, "When you were born, you look like a little independent man. And when you were 4, you told us that you're taking off as soon as you can." And I remember that conversation. I was like,
Where were you going? Where were you going to
somewhere, but
go?
I wanted to live on my own when I was 4.
Okay.
So, and she always tells me that like whatever I would tell you what to do, you would do the exact opposite. So
Hmm.
it's very ironic
Yeah.
that I am this way, and I would do that to my kids, and I expect nothing but strong performance
And obedience.
and obedience. Well, to that matter, my 16-year-old does not need to be told to work out at 6 a.m.
Hmm.
He's there.
Hmm.
We've been at it for so many years. He's just there. I don't need to tell him. He's an athlete, 3 season athlete in his high school.
Awesome.
Like I think that I pushed him in that direction. And once he gained enough momentum, he just took over, and now he is doing it on his own. He was a really poor student, and I came up with a way to motivate him. Now he's mostly A's and a couple B's
Yeah.
here and there kind of student,
Right.
right? But it took a lot of this, a lot of pushing.
Hmm.
And I assume that I could have communicated, going back to the subject, I could
Yeah.
have communicated a lot of those things better, but I never took the time. I can come up with a lot of excuses, but excuses are
Hmm.
not results, right? So
Yeah. You
yeah,
learn.
and now I'm thinking about this and going back to the legal profession. I just thought about the show that's going to be restarted now, The Suits.
Oh, is it
If
starting again?
they're starting it again, they're
Ah.
starting it again. So they moved it to Netflix about a year ago.
Yeah.
It became so popular on Netflix that they decided to restart it. And I watched it a
Okay.
little bit. And one thing that you will notice, so for those of you who have not seen The Suits, you're a lawyer and you haven't watched at least a couple of episodes, it is about a fictitious corporate law firm based in Manhattan. And every single person there is a supreme hard ass. And every communication, the way that those people communicate there, you understand that these are lawyers who are trained to go for the win in every communication, my way or the highway. You will get things done the way that I expect you to get them done, when I expect you to get them done. You're not going to home until it's done the way that I like, or you're never going home. Right. So I just realized that, going back to like the whole law firm culture. And by the way, this is probably not even 80% of all law firm owners, but a substantial percentage of law firm owners are going for the win with every communication, whether it's with clients, with partners, or with their employees. It's for the win. And by the way, it could be considered to be for the greater good, but it doesn't mean that it's actually working out for the greater good in the long term. Yes, you could get the person to do exactly what you want them to do, which is be in the basement working out by 6:15 a.m. But in the longer term, that could probably create some resentment. And maybe they'll raise their kids in the exact opposite way, and my grandchildren will never work out, which would be really devastating to me.
Or they may be like my son, who's 16, who plays on his varsity basketball team, works out in the morning down in our basement, goes to the rec center and works out after basketball. And this is what he does because he loves it. You know, they may come to it on their own with a love for it. And I have to say, he is the one who introduced me to Suits. And we watched everything, the whole thing. And it was great bonding for the two of us. Like I said, not a lot of talking, but we could talk about Suits. For anyone listening thinking I want to be a lawyer and Suits looks really awesome, and I want that life, I want to wear the beautiful clothes and order people around. Suits is a soap opera set in a law firm. There is nothing realistic about it, which is what makes it so much fun to watch.
I bet. That did not look realistic at all.
No, not at all.
So this conversation took so many unexpected turns. I so appreciate you and your insights. For people who are listening, watching this, and they're like, "Oh, that's me." Oh, if somebody asked that question of my employees, they would probably rate me as a 3 or 4 or 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. How would they connect with your content? How would they connect with you and learn more about you and the services that you do, how you serve your clients, and how you could help them go from maybe a 3 to a 7 or 8, which would significantly, even in the short term, probably improve quality of their life?
Yeah, well, you can find me at my website is a good place to learn more about me. It is Tribeca, which is my neighborhood that I lived in New York City. Blue, the color, consulting. When I was starting my company, I did not have a great marketing expert like you, Sasha, to tell me that name was way too long. So that's what it is. You can.
Why is it Tribeca Blue? I looked at the name and I'm like, why is it Tribeca Blue?
Because just Tribeca was already taken. So I had to add something else in there. You can see how well thought out this was.
That's okay.
I'm also on LinkedIn. That's pretty much I'm not huge on social media, but that is where I will post and put other things that I'm doing, and also some public speaking and media training tips. And I'm Laurie Gilbertson on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with anyone who's listening. And I would throw out one tool, Sasha, because I'm going to take our whole conversation from communicating, corporate culture, and teenagers to artificial intelligence. This is a tool I use that I love. And for people to get a sense of maybe how they look, how they sound, and how their communication is going across. It's called Yoodli. I am not paid for this. I use their tool. I use their free tool. It's fantastic. I get nothing from it. I just want people to learn. Yoodli, it's Yoodli. I think it's .ai, and you can record yourself. and you record yourself. You can watch yourself back. It will tell you filler words. It will tell you how much energy you have. It will give you different ways of maybe saying things that might be more powerful. And it's just a really great supplementary tool to kind of actual coaching and actual talking with people, because most people don't watch themselves. Most people don't listen to themselves. It's a really good place to start. And I think there's actually features where you can even record yourself in meetings now.
I was
Maybe if you're
about
on
to
Zoom and
ask.
see that. Yeah,
Because if you just do this in front of camera
right.
on your own, chances are you're going to be
Right.
faking it a little bit.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
if it's a
Maybe.
meeting, it's a
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah. And so you can do that on your Zoom meetings. Doesn't record anyone else, just records you. And then it gives you suggestions. I recommend it to my clients and I use it, and I find it's just a fantastic tool. So I encourage people to take a look
Oh,
at that too.
my sales team and my account management teams are so getting to use that starting maybe next week. I don't want to force it down their throats, but
Yeah.
I think it would be very cool for them to kind of get a
Yeah.
glimpse of what they look like when they're communicating with clients.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Laurie, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much.
Sasha, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.